Thank you very much. So I take you can see those slides there, okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Fantastic. Folks, thank you so much. I know it's tricky on a Friday afternoon for a conference too, so thank you for sticking with this. You know, as Angelica just said, I'm Marie Walsh from Limerick Institute, and I've had the pleasure of working with Scott Kavanagh over the last 2 years, and he's from Bradley University in Illinois. We wanted to present today, I suppose, a case study of a project that we have run together over the past 2 years, and we're actually going to do another iteration of it in September. And this does not come from an ego place when I say the project has been amazing. So amazing, and it, like I said, this is not about ego. It was an unexpected, pleasant surprise for Scott and I. So it challenged us as educators to really rethink how we work with students, and even, you know, do we really need to have marks and assignments for students to actually do work? Like, how do we do this? So we thought we'd give you some of the inside story of, you know, where did it come from, and, you know, how did it work, the outcomes, where we're going to next. But really, as educators, we were thinking from a teaching and learning perspective, you know, what can we take and learn from this project? You know, around how do we motivate students, and how do we, the idea of an international project can seem a bit scary or big or complicated at times. And certainly, as we've all learned in this past year, and certainly with this project, it wouldn't have been possible without technology. Really, what we would like to do today is really to challenge everyone here in this group who's working with students to actually take on your version of an Out My Window project. So we're going to explain to you what it is, but that's our challenge to you. And Scott and I, you can contact us afterwards and we'll support you in doing that if it's something that you're interested in. Very briefly, because I know time is precious today, you'll see some of the images there. There's Scott in the middle photo there on the bottom of the slide, and Scott and his colleague Ethan there on the left came to Ireland 2 years ago, and 3 years ago now, I think, and they're external examiners in one of our programs. That's where I met them. They kindly invited me over to Bradley in the bottom right there to do a 2-week stint at Bradley University, which was great fun. And then at an Erasmus course that summer in Prague, I met a principal who told me about this Out My Window idea. And I said, God, that sounds great. Do you mind if I use that? She said, fill your boots. And so in September of that year, I contacted Scott and said, what do you think? So what is this project all about? Well, I'm actually going to pass you over to Scott to begin to answer that.
So essentially, we just wanted to work with the students in a way where they could just do something that was very simple, required very little effort for the project to start. I don't know about you, but a lot of my students, that can be the very most difficult part when doing a creative project is, where do I start? So for this, it was simply looking out your window, wherever that might be, bedroom window, apartment window, a window from your childhood, didn't matter. And that was the genesis of the project, something very simple that everyone had access to instantly. Okay, next one. So Marie was very easily found. 35 students in the digital animation production program there at Clonmel, and then I found 35 students of mine here on campus at Bradley, and I just randomly assigned them together. We built a Google Doc that allowed us to keep track of everyone and just randomly put them together. And so for us, the key steps were, again, for the students to just simply choose a window and then sit down and write a description. Write whatever they saw, whatever they felt from that window. And what was interesting is we had students that wrote from the perspective of where they were right that second, and they looked out a window and they wrote a description. But we also had students who sort of closed their minds and thought of a window or a view from when they were on vacation or from their childhood. And so they would write that description. They were given the email address of their colleague across the Atlantic, and they sent them an email with just a description, and that was it. From there, the students were to make a piece of art based upon what they read. And the best part about this was there were no restrictions on how to make that art. They could draw it by hand, they could do it on computer, 2D, 3D, painting, you know, whatever they wanted to do. There were no rules on how to create the actual artwork. We had a very short timeline for them to get this done. And when it was all done, we both had intended on printing these up and hanging them and having a show. That happened on the campus of LIT in Clonmel. Unfortunately, it did not happen here, but it will happen next year. And what is also good news is that the project was so successful that we will continue to do it.
Thanks, Scott. Now, I realize I'm breaking all of the presentation rules by the amount of content here on the left-hand side of the slide. Don't worry, you don't need to read it all. I just thought I'd give you the unedited version of one of the descriptions. So you can see here that Ella Doolan from LIT, she chose her bedroom window, gave a lovely description there of what she sees, and she sent that on to Fiona, who was in Bradley. And then Fiona, you know, as Scott just said there, could use any art style she wished, and then created this image on the right-hand side. And I can show you what happened with the reverse. So likewise, Fiona had her description, and there's some lovely poetic pieces in here, I have to say. Even there, closer to the end in that last paragraph, when it shines in the wintertime, its soft red light glows onto the cold blue snow, painting a sunset on the nighttime canvas. So this is the view from her bedroom window. Now, I popped several other examples at the very end of these slides. So if you are interested in knowing more about Out My Window, I have them there at the very end. And as Scott also said, they could use any medium they wanted. So some used, you know, pencil, charcoals, 2D, 3D, watercolors, whatever they liked. And it was really interesting for us to see how poetic or how literal their descriptions were. I'm just going to show you here some of the students. You can see their happy, proud faces here. And this was the day of the launch of the exhibition. And as you can see behind them on the wall, the students actually painted windows. And then we filled each window with a pair of artwork and the descriptions. Okay, so I'm going to pass you over to Scott for some of the outcomes.
So, you know, I think one of the first things we learned was how quickly we could do something like this if we did it online. The students are already online all the time, and so getting emails back and forth, making sure that everybody was paired up correctly, that all worked very, very seamlessly. We also really encouraged the spirit of the project, which we kind of mentioned on the outset was, hey, you're gonna get this description, but resist the urge to jump on Google Earth and actually look up what this person was talking about. We wanted them to solely use the description they received as the genesis of the project, and they really did. We really got to laughing about some of the cultural differences. You know, it seemed like I don't know, someone mentioned that why are there so many trampolines in Ireland? Someone mentioned that. Someone in Ireland had talked about how there was a path outside their house. In the United States, a path is something that only exists out in the woods, where in Ireland, apparently the path was a sidewalk, which is what we would call it. So those sort of cultural differences were so fun for the students to do, and they built these great connections. And what was amazing was at the end of the project, these students didn't just share their email addresses, but they began to share their Instagram handles, their, you know, and so they built this community of other students like themselves, and where they could continue to share after the project was over. Thanks,
Scott. So there were just so many unexpected outcomes, I think, from this project. One of the things that we loved was, well, certainly I'll speak for myself, was the first years being able to get their artwork kind of recognized, printed up on the walls. I've been teaching a long time, and I know several years ago it would have been thought that, you know, the fourth years produce the best work, or the third years produce the best work. So it was just fantastic for them to be in the door, and 1 month in, their work was being shared and exhibited, and they were part of this international project. So I think there is a piece here, a learning around, and this is my own personal opinion, that sometimes, you know, as students, they can focus on the next assignment, and as lecturers, we can sometimes do that and not have that luxury of time of actually celebrating, recognizing, reflecting on the experience. You can see here in the top left, I love that image there of the students, and the gentleman there in the image is actually the representative from the twinning committee between Peoria and Clonmel. So it was the connections between the students, it was the connection between the towns, it was the connection between both Bradley and also LIT. and just the spin-offs from the project. So this is just a view of some of the people there at the informal launch, but the promotion of it, podcast came from it. There was an article in Ireland about it, and I'm going to pass you over to Scott now, who's talking about the article on his side of the Atlantic in the Peoria Times.
We have students at Bradley from all over the United States, and when they come, they register with a service that we have where if that student is recognized for something, then their hometown newspaper is automatically alerted of that. And so we had students from Arizona, from Georgia, from New York, from obviously Illinois, that had these amazing little articles about their artwork and about the project that ran in their hometown newspapers. And I got a lot of nice emails from mothers of students who were so proud that their child's work was in the local newspaper. It was great. So where are we going next? The project is going to be featured there in Ireland at the Clancy Music and Art Festival. We've already laid the groundwork for doing the project in September of this year, and we're very excited to do that as well. Marie has also been talking with some people about exploring the opportunity of showing the project virtually, which I think would also be an interesting thing to look at, although I do like the face-to-face part. I don't know about you guys, but I'm very tired of virtual. I'm very tired of Microsoft Teams and Zoom. I'm ready to go to galleries and go and see people face-to-face. So one of the lessons that we wanted to do to make this very, very easy for students to take on as a volunteer project. You know, we ask our students to do so much over the course of a semester. You feel guilty to ask them to do something not for a grade. So for this, the structure was very clear. It was very, very fun for them. They got to do something completely outside of what they were used to doing. They got to work in their own art style. They weren't being told what to do. The project was what, Marie, was 3 weeks from inception to being done, very, very quick.
So, yeah.
And they got to collaborate with someone who is very, very much like them, very similar in age, very similar in artistic style, but who happened to live in a completely different country. And as Marie said, it was very important for our students freshmen through seniors, to have their work printed on the wall. A lot of my students, they work in digital and they share their work through Instagram or whatever, but they don't see their work on the wall. And having that as part of the project was really important to them.
Thanks, Scott. And, you know, one of the other, I suppose, things that struck us really was how easy the project was. Now, we had the advantage of having this pre-existing relationship because I had been to Bradley, Scott had come to Ireland. So that certainly builds flexibility and trust, right? But I think a big piece of this project is just finding students that have so much in common. You know, and I think Scott and I both have a belief in the value of education in terms of, you know, travel, and that we're living in such a small world. And this project, apart from our time, it actually cost very, very little. So financially very low cost, very high individual motivation. And I just think, you know, Scott said about being fun and positive, and Mike Anderson writes about joyful learning, you know, about being positive with how we speak about things and having joy and fun in learning. And I think that really played into the project, and that's why it made, you know, it worked so well. I also popped in some links at the very end of this around Erasmus and European funding and Fulbright and things like that for anybody who wants to explore more international projects. But really, when I spoke to my international office actually last week and asked them, how do you do that, set up an international project? And they basically said, talk to other departments, talk to your research office, talk to your international office, talk to careers, and see what links are already there.
This slide is kind of out of date now. When we started the project, that was obviously post-pandemic. And thinking about this project would not have been possible without technology, without Google Docs. We met over Skype, which 2 years ago seemed sort of antiquated. It didn't seem as antiquated as it does now. It seemed very new and interesting. But I think as we've all learned over this past year that the technology is there. It can be a hindrance, but it can also be an amazing collaborative tool to put some of these students face to face, to have them talk with someone who is just like them, but who is so far removed from their daily normal lives.
Yeah, and we connected them via Skype, but now obviously with a breakout space on MS Teams and Zoom, you know, there's a lot more possibilities going forward using technology. So we wanted to, you know, we just gave you an outline of the project. Honestly, it's been an amazingly positive experience, genuinely. And I put it down to the motivation of the students. And certainly it's been a pleasure working with Scott, honestly. And it's challenged us as educators, absolutely. But really the challenge is for any educators today, if you want to run a project like this, please contact Scott, we'd love to see it, you know, take even more legs and grow and develop, and we'll support you in any way we can. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much, Marie and Scott, for a most inspirational